Well, hey YouTube, it's Petey Two Finger here with a brand new segment we're gonna call Petey Two Fingers Do's and Don'ts. Do's and don'ts, 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 do's and don'ts,
Okay.
do's. You got it? Okay. Number one, Petey Two Fingers Do's and Don'ts of DIY. Do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts of DIY. Do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts of DIY. You like it? I hope you do. Don't ever build anything with Millennium Bypass. Do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts of DIY. Don't ever build anything from Quantum Effects. Do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts of DIY. Don't ever order PCBs from Osh Park unless there's several verified build reports. Do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts of DIY. Our drummer's been drinking. Do's and don'ts,
Our
do's
drummer
and
didn't know
don'ts,
she'd have to do this.
do's and don'ts of DIY. Don't ever order through-hole JFETs from any supplier other than Steve at Small Bear, DigiKey, or Mauser. Do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts of DIY. Do purchase JFET daughter boards from Delic PCB, but make a video bitching about their shipping. Do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts of DIY. Well, that's been do's and don'ts of DIY. Oh, wait, I forgot one. Don't ever build a project that uses an LM386. Do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts of DIY. Do build projects that feature a TDA 7052A. Do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts of DIY. So, yeah, basically, let me get this annoying light off. Looks like the nuclear bomb's going off. So, here's the deal. If you order through-hole JFETs on eBay, they'll have an F on them, like a Fairchild F, but it'll be like, like they're not Fairchild. That's a fake F. It's not a real Fairchild F.
F for fake.
F for fake. Faith no more. So what you'll end up with is it's supposed to be DSG. It'll be DGS or some kind of weird pinout where you'll have to like bend two of the legs and jam it in there, and we don't want that. We don't want that. If you think you're going to beat the system and get one of these little component testers, they have these little things. It comes in a plexiglass case, and you put that in there. Well, here's what I want you to do: grab one of your JFETs, put it in there, turn it on, and look. It'll show you the pinout, DSG or whatever it is. Then shut it off, turn it 180, turn it back on, and check your pinout. It's the same. There you go. So what does that tell you? Well, you need to get your JFETs from a reputable supplier. You go, well, they don't have them in stock. That's because they won't. They won't. So what you need to do is what I've done: convert to SMT and get daughter boards, solder them onto the daughter board, and then get the little pins that go in the daughter board, which those do not fit in the sockets. I thought that they would fit in the sockets. They don't. So what I've been doing is cutting the legs off of a thicker resistor or a thinner capacitor, and then cutting three of those and soldering them onto the daughter board as pins. Or you can just bypass the socket. You're not going to be able to as easily pull pull the JFET daughter board out. And soldering those things on there it's a tweaky, touchy thing. Now, as far as the like I said, a bunch of projects that I've done where I've used JFETs have been ruined because, well, I don't want to say they've been ruined. I got them to work, but it was just a pain in the neck. You know, you can look at one thing that I built was it's a 3-socket where you stick the transistor in the socket, and then it's got 3 different color wires coming down with 3 more sockets soldered on, or 3 pins. And then you can move those pins around. That's what you want to build, and that'll determine what you're working with, what the actual pin out of the JFET really is. So that's going to save you some headache. You know, knowing when you buy the SMT ones, they're clearly labeled what they are, and there aren't any fakes. There aren't bullshit ones. So that's one way to do it. But then you've got to obtain all the parts, which isn't cheap. You need some kind of legs for the pins. Are you going to get 2.54 spaced header pins? You know, or are you going to use your own stuff? Cut some paper clips up, whatever you want to do. But it turns into a thing because you need legs to attach to the PCB. You need the PCB themselves, which, I mean, Delic has them for 65 cents for 4. There are some that are on eBay. They're called SOT 23 to DIP adapter boards, but the pinout's wrong on them. So there's really no cheap way to do it, you know. And as far as the 7052A chip versus the LM386, a lot of people like to build circuits with LM386s or specifically little mini amps, Ruby, Tiny Giant. They're not clean. They're really distorted, and they have a nasty artifacts on the release of the note. When the note fades out at the very end, it crackles. And a lot of the distortion circuits built with that LM386 do the same thing. And that's a deal breaker for me. So generally, LM386, get out of here. No. If the circuit uses that chip, it's got to be some magical circuit for me to want to do it. Meaning there's something else going on, you know. For me, every time I've ever built something with an LM386 in it, I never boxed it up. It was always noisy, distorted. It had that, and then if it did work okay, there would be that nasty artifact at the end of the thing, you know. As far as I'm Cressall guy, Felix Callium, Quantum Effects. He designed the Ruthenium PCB, which you'll find that I think it's been removed. The Vero layout is awesome. It's the best spring reverb, DIY spring reverb driver in existence. So build the Vero layout of that. There's where it shows the cutouts. If you're looking at that Vero layout, there's a black, like the cutout is usually a red square with a red circle in the middle. There's a black one, and that's just to let you know if you're using a charge pump chip other than the TL or the LT1054, like if you're using a 760, not the SCP version, like the one that has 2 different frequency levels that it runs at. One is a lower frequency that's within the audible bandwidth, and if you short pins 1 and 8, it sends that frequency into the non-audible range. Okay, and that's why the guy that made that layout colored that cutout black, because it's optional. It depends on the charge pump chip that you use. So if you're using the LT1054, which is what the circuit calls for, you go ahead and make that cut. But if you're using the 7660 charge pump, you might want to omit that cut. You could always make the cut and solder in a jumper wire later. So, also pictured on that Vero layout, there's through holes for relief. So instead of having the wire come in and go into a hole, what you do, you have the wire come in, and you use a drill bit that will expand the hole on a Vero and make it a little bigger. So you can run the actual wire, the insulated part of the wire, through. It comes up through the bottom, and then it bends around and goes in and makes a solder point. And that's a strain relief. And this is something I'm going to start doing whenever I can. If I've got room to make the Vero 4 wider, 2 on each side, I'm gonna. And that'll give me room to drill the hole and come around and solder in. So that's pretty cool. Do's and don'ts of DIY. Do you remember what the first one was? I've completely forgot. Osh Park, Osh Park, buying a PCB from Osh Park. They sell PCBs that are bad. Okay, that was the ruthenium. I bought 3 of them. None of them worked. And then the guy got mad at me when we were troubleshooting them via email and told me, you need to just give up and buy a Surfy Bear. A Surfy Bear is a $300 tube project. And this is for a battery-powered amp. So that's the quantum effects thing. That's that guy, M. Cressall, Felix Callium, who calls himself Quantum Effects and designs PCBs and just throws all the specs out the window, throws the test software out the window, and what you end up with is a... I'm not the only one that bought the boards and they didn't work. So that's a definite DIY do and don't. Don't ever buy anything from that guy. And the same goes for Osh Park. I mean, do you want to pay them to troubleshoot their products? I mean, if you're fine with that, you know, if you're the type of guy who really knows what they're doing, you got an oscilloscope, you know Ohm's law, you're really good at troubleshooting, you can check all the voltages and automatically know what's wrong with the circuit, you're a braver and better man than I, because that's not the type of DIY that I do. I do paint by number, I throw the stuff together, and it better work. When I'm buying a PCB, it better not have any errors, shorts, or the bomb is wrong. And that's what I ran into. Shorts, the layout is wrong, it does not work, and an error in the bomb. And that's Felix Callium, or M. Cressall of Quantum Effects. So if you're going to buy something from Osh Park, make sure that you can find a couple build reports that say, I built it and it worked. Otherwise, you know, you might buy this thing and put it together and then it doesn't work, and then you got to try to find the guy who designed it, and then start emailing him, and then he's going to get mad at you and tell you you need to go and buy a commercial product. That's a little late for that when you went ahead and bought all these other, you know, spring tank, expensive chips, charge pump chips, all the other parts. You know, it's like, it represents like 30 hours of work what went into building, populating 3 of these PCBs. So that's a definite do and don't of DIY. I think we just about covered that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I just remembered another one that I forgot. Millennium Bypass. Someone, Pinkster, had gifted me a pair of Leica Fuzz PCBs from Dead End Effects. I was shy on parts. I had 2 of them, so I was able to build 2, but there was a couple missing components. I only had enough parts to finish one of them. So I finished the one, and it didn't work. The fuzz circuit actually worked fine. I could bias it and everything. It was the Millennium Bypass circuit that did not function. And then the parts that I ordered came in, and I had been pulling my hair out and troubleshooting and writing the guy who designed it, and he was like, I don't know what to tell you. You know, and which is kind of understandable. I mean, how are you going to troubleshoot someone's circuit if you're not there? He's saying stuff like, oh, make sure you don't have cold solder joints and the right parts, and it's like, I use flux and I have a helper and we triple check everything, so it better work. Like, the way we build stuff, there's no margin for error, because everything's marked out and triple checked before we put a component in, and every component is properly tested before we install it. So we're not, all of that, like, make sure that you didn't put it in backwards, like, none of that troubleshooting is going to be helpful to us, because we don't make any of those mistakes. We're on another level of DIY here. There's 2 people doing it. She knows where I screw up, I know where she screws up, and we're both policing each other, and there's never an error. We're flawless about our stuff. So if it doesn't work, then there's a problem. And having people tell you, "Oh, you put the diode in backwards," or check your electrolytics, like that's just not helpful. I mean, we're this isn't our first rodeo. I've built hundreds of circuits. So being treated like you're a goof when you're not a goof, that kind of sucks. And what it ended up being, I have no idea. I still have one Millennium bypass that does not work. I'm guessing every time I'm putting a part in, the pinout is different on it and it's frying it. It's blowing it. Even though I kept buying and throwing more money at it and putting them in. Why is it that the other one, the first time I put the parts in it, it works flawlessly? You tell me. You tell me. So, when it comes down to stuff like that, I'm glad that we got two PCBs. That I was gifted two PCBs. I'm not happy that I bought another $15 chassis and all the other parts that went into it for this broken one. But hey, I got one Leica fuzz that works flawlessly, and it's properly biased. It's got the right leakage transistors in it. It sounds incredible. That fuzz. There was two of them that sold on Reverb in the last couple of years. The first one sold for $1,800. The other one sold for $2,100. So it's a big deal fuzz. It's a big deal fuzz. And owning one that works properly, I gotta say, I kind of don't even care about the other one. You know, it would have been cool if I would have got it working because I was going to give it to somebody who's kind of famous, Adrian Ballou. He asked me to build him a fuzz tone years ago, and I've never followed through because he's kind of put our friendship in jeopardy a few times. Anyway, yeah, that's the do's and don'ts of DIY for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this was helpful. If this type of content has benefited for you or you enjoy it, please support me by thumbing up, subscribing, clicking the bell, leave a nice comment, stuff like that. I'm sick of people leaving comments about the damn acid casualties thing. We get over that already. All right, you guys, I'll see you around. Wish me luck. It seems like that's the main ingredient that you need in DIY when you're buying PCBs. From non-reputable suppliers like Osh Park. So, yeah, buyer beware, Osh Park. This has been episode 1 of Do's and Don'ts of DIY. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.